Welcome back, everyone. Even though they actually released a pretty damn good Prince of Persia game, no, everybody is mad at Ubisoft again. Headlines and viral tweets went across the internet telling audiences that, quote, Ubisoft exec says gamers need to get comfortable with not owning your games. And, well, audiences don't agree with that. This, anti-consumer nonsense, right? A demand for audiences to give up on ownership as a concept, a sign of rot at the heart of our industry. And also a really good opportunity for everybody to quote, tweet, and make jokes about already not choosing to buy Ubisoft games. But to bring it to reality, all of this came from an interview with GameIndustry.biz, and it's an interview that ostensibly was about the launch of their new subscription model and what they at Ubisoft think will be going on in the future. Going into the interview, it's a future that they think won't just be about subscriptions, because per the interview that everybody's mad about, they agree that people don't want a subscription-only future. So how then is everybody mad at Ubisoft? What the hell is going on? That is our job today. And what I can say is that our future does have a subscription to Bellular.ghost.io. Look, okay, level with you. AdSense is not something that I can responsibly rely on anymore. That's point A. Point B, CPMs are only decreasing. They are truly tiny right now, and this show does require a team between research and editing. That's why we've got our own platform. There, you'll get Loading Screen, which is our publication every day. We cover a lot more stories there. You'll get early access to our news reports, like this video, research docs, and it's where you can directly support our mission to bring fully researched, well-sourced news from a perspective that actually has skin in the game with this industry. That's our mission. Okay, with that said, let's roll. Let's get into the document. This is going to be a fun one because, of course, of the context that so many of us will have forgotten. I mean, I kind of did as well. And that is, Ubisoft purchased the Activision streaming rights from Xbox. It was basically as a part of getting that whole deal through to kind of remove concerns when it came to basically subscription and streaming game stuff, which is all fairly interesting. And as a result of that, and also the fact that Ubisoft is doing the shocking thing of actually releasing games again, that they fully updated their subscription offering. Here's the deal: $7.99 a month for Ubisoft Plus Classic, a selection of standard edition games from their back catalogue, which is actually what PlayStation Plus subscribers already get included, but now that's also on PC. The other thing then is Ubisoft Plus Premium, which is $14.99 a month, quite a bit more expensive. That gives you their entire back catalogue in their premium editions, new releases on day one, which I think is the fairly major thing. That's certainly a leg up over, PlayStation, right? As well as monthly rewards, discounts, and streaming via Xbox, and also Amazon Luna, which I'm sure several people use. So far, so honestly, not particularly volatile, but it is where things get a little bit funny. I mean, take a look at this marketing image. Ubisoft Plus subscription service, cancel any time. It's almost saying, buy our new release, $14.99, and remove your subscription. But maybe that's what they want because of people lapsing, perhaps, or, hey, what if you like a game, there's a big update for it, you want to come back? Because ultimately, think about the premium version of this. What would happen is you'd probably get, say, the new Assassin's Creed game, look at Valhalla with all of its DLC, you'll get that, plus all the DLC, and their entire model, right, their whole model with even their single-player games, it's pretty much predicated on turning the single players into quasi-live services, like the new Avatar game that released with a store, and it's got a robust enough looking DLC plan. So you know what's going on. Is that what people are angry about? No. I mean, people don't really care. If anything, the most interesting thing that happened to me when I read any of this was, oh, Amazon Luna, that exists. I completely forgot. No, what actually has got the situation riled up is the Ubisoft Director of Subscriptions, Philippe Tremblay? Who knows? I don't know. French. I skived at school. Now, he sat down to talk about the changes to the service and the wider strategy at Ubisoft, and that is where things kind of do begin to spiral out of control from a public relations perspective. So, to summarize it briefly, he says Ubisoft Plus had millions of subs who have played over 500 million hours of gameplay. There are multiple behavior models. There's some people who sign up and then just play forever. There's also people who actually go, try a game for a month, and then end up buying it, which I suppose that is definitely going to be, ultimately, if you like the game, deciding to pay a premium to essentially experience less risk. So I think that is a kind of interesting behavior. And then as an organization, they like the idea of people seeing they have their own service as opposed to just being on somebody else's. So for them, that's quite good. I do sort of understand that. But then we get to the more important part. This is where the interviewer, Christopher Dring, steers the feature in the direction of a wider subscription model push that obviously we're seeing in so many different industries. I mean, imagine my shock whenever I looked at my Xbox account and via that found out I've been paying for Microsoft Office Family 365 for like 3 years. That was a bit spooky. So from Philippe's perspective, there are two elements to this. Number one, Ubisoft Plus had its biggest month ever in October 2023. That certainly is interesting to me. I mean, as far as I could tell, in terms of PR, in terms of news, buzz, people talking, nobody thinks about it, ever. Yet that was their biggest month by their own numbers. So that to me is absolutely fascinating. They say it's still growing, with 1 in 10 Ubisoft Plus subscribers having never engaged with the company's games before. I think that's interesting, but I certainly would question the validity of that number and just how much they can even track something like that. You can track user accounts, you can track emails, you can't track people yet, but you can try. Point 2 then, he talks about player choice, and I suppose this is when things get interesting. He says, the point is not to force users to go down one route or the other. We offer purchase, we offer subscription, and it's the gamer's preference that is important here. That all seems reasonable. You might be thinking, you lured me in with drama. I saw headlines across the industry, tweets and Twitter and stuff. Where's the drama? Well, we're getting to the smoking gun. So this was a question asked of the director of subscriptions of Ubisoft about what the potential of the model would be. Would you believe that he thinks the field his job exists in is going to continue growing? Obviously, yes. He's not going to say, actually, as the director of subscriptions, I think that subscriptions are really a declining market. No, he's not going to say that. He specifically here is speaking on an industry-wide level about the sorts of audience shifts that we're seeing that would have to happen for a subscription model to overtake the digital or physical media models in the way that basically has happened with like film, television, music. And I can certainly say from watching, as an example, Dune and Oppenheimer on a 4K Blu-ray, my God, streaming services are absolutely awful, and for a shockingly similar amount of money, you can get something with a good bitrate and actually enjoy the film. So, yeah, physical media, honestly, it rocks. It's best. Anyhow, one of the things we saw is that gamers are used to, a little bit like with DVD, having and not owning their games. That's the consumer shift that needs to happen. They've got comfortable not owning their CD or DVD collection. That's a transformation that's been a bit slower to happen in games. As gamers grow comfortable in that aspect, you don't lose your progress. If you resume your game at another time, your progress file is still there. That's not being deleted. You don't lose what you've built on the game or your engagement with the game. So it's about feeling comfortable with not owning your game. That is what he said. Of course, the thing he said just before that will not be caught in any of the headlines is he said that the whole thing we're doing is giving people a choice. Yes. So in this thing that then spread across the internet, what he's actually talking about is what are the industry-wide shifts that would have to happen for digital to completely overtake the other things, or subscription to overtake the other things, right? For subscription to overtake digital purchase and physical purchase. They got comfortable not owning their CD or DVD collection. That's the transformation that's been a bit slower in games. And he basically says that people are growing more comfortable in that aspect. As an example, just you don't lose your progress for a game anymore because it's always a cloud thing, as an example. And he ends by saying, so it's about feeling comfortable with not owning your game. Now, again, remember, this is a response of, what needs to happen for that timeline to occur. That's essentially what he is saying there. He's not exactly, he's not basically looking at the camera and saying, you will own nothing, you will be happy with it. P.S. Get in your pod and eat the crickets. Man, would a cricket be nice? Some people say the texture is pretty dope, but I don't know. And what's important there is the wider context, right? Because he is looking at the growth of PlayStation and Xbox subscriptions. He's looking at Ubisoft subs on PC, and he's seeing that subscriptions are not being adopted at a rate that will replace purchases. He goes on to say, when you look at the different subscription services that are out there, we've had a rapid expansion, but it's still relatively small compared to the other models. So that's the bit you probably won't have seen, but obviously, look, we've been trying to be, I don't want to say charitable, but to ensure that we're kind of taking him at good faith. But, you know, to crank on the old critical thinking here, do you think that Ubisoft's director of subscriptions wants you to subscribe? The answer to that question, very obviously, is yes. That's how he gets paid. I don't know if he has bonuses, but who knows? Maybe his bonus would be tied to hitting some sort of KPI if he's that high up enough of a dude. One thing, though, is we do appear to see here, from what he's saying, because he clearly has access to numbers that we don't, such as literal Ubisoft sales, but also he will clearly have data from Ubisoft games that, have went across to some of those other services. So he's still saying that actually the full shift is not happening yet, and that it is indeed happening slower than it's happened in other places. And I think that's great news. I do actually think that's great news. Because look, who are the people who benefit the most from the big subscription push? I think it is those platform holders. I mean, you might be thinking, why is everybody involved with like film and television striking against studios? Because as they have, as things have moved to subscription, Netflix and stuff, all of their like conditions, remuneration, etc. seems to have got worse. But then there is the side of that, like when you're Disney and you're spending, $200 million on a television show that's a load of pants, that's really rushed and not that well written. Yeah, I don't know. You maybe then do have that problem where these streaming services are being ran by these big tech companies. And what do these big tech companies have? They have growth valuations. They are basically funneling money into the big money pit, trying to get more market share than their competitors, which, if you were to say that there were sort of degrees of speculative bubble-like dynamics floating about there, you could certainly argue that it's not really the best thing for the efficient allocation of capital. Anyway, let's move on, though, to the CEO of Larian. He sees the idea of centrally controlled subscription models as a threat to developers being able to directly reach audiences, and I agree. I definitely agree. I do not like the big subscription future in a world where it becomes super dominant, because right now it's like basically not doing a massive amount of damage. There are certainly interesting discussions to be had in and around game financing, how Game Pass sort of impacted that with indies for a bit, then seems to have not really been impacting as much because Microsoft, I think, have definitely been pulling back on the indie side. Something I've something plenty of us have heard from places, and I think it's pretty apparent when you actually look at what's going on the platforms. But anyway, what he says, right? Getting a board to okay a project fueled by idealism is almost impossible, and idealism needs room to exist, even if it can lead to disaster. Subscription models will always end up being cost-benefit analyses, exercises intended to maximize profit. Because here's the thing, right? See, if you're doing one of those deals, who has the information there? Microsoft, or Sony, or Ubisoft, or whoever the hell you are doing that deal with. They have that information, and they're basically saying, look, we're offering you this amount of money. And you'll be like, justifications, let's talk about them. And, they'll be like, subscription, whatever. So it's one of those things. I remember, I think as a part of the big lawsuit, a bunch of Game Pass deals got leaked. And certainly some developers got better deals than others. And it's because you have their informational asymmetry, which is a really important concept. As an example, even in some of what I do, obviously, we work with sponsors and that sort of thing, because basically, eggs, basket, it's the way that it's got to be. But one of the things that can happen with some agencies is like an agency could just take like 50% and never tell the content creator. There's actually stories of this happening, and it's completely insane. Hasn't happened to us, but like, man, yeah, informational asymmetry. It is certainly one of those things to think about, like in your own life. Just, what do I know? What do they know? Is there a difference? Am I going to be screwed by this? Turns out all too often the answer can be yes. Anyway, as Sven goes on to say, there is nothing wrong with that, but it may become a monopoly of subscription services. We are already dependent on a select group of digital distribution platforms, and discoverability is brutal. My God, is he right? Should those platforms all switch to subscription, it will become savage. And he really is right. To go to his TLDR, you won't find our games on a subscription service, even if I respect that for many developers, it presents an opportunity to make their game. I don't have an issue with that. I just want to make sure the other ecosystem doesn't die because it's valuable. He is absolutely right. Even discoverability is a very challenging thing within our industry. That is why, as an example, when I was starting, our game studio with Thomas way back in the day, the whole point was we basically already, even back then, knew the discoverability would be a nightmare. You just look at how many games are released on Steam. So then you just quickly realize, we need games with concepts that inherently are easy to communicate and can sort of go out to people, but also, we can't just be a developer. Actually, having a media wing has a really big benefit. Again, as I even said about how we're doing Ghost, how we're doing sponsors, eggs, baskets. What does that mean? That means job security. Job security means, well, it'll be a good place to work, and people's skills can compound, and all of those good things that we like, that we want to happen more. So, to go to the non-subscription model, just because the sub-model is not being adopted at a massive speed doesn't really mean that things are somehow massively better right now, because on the topic of ownership and preservation, we all know that Ubisoft are not maybe the best there. That's where it gets quite interesting. I mean, even just look at this. Ubisoft just delisted a game without warning. Yeah, that's kind of fun. So, with The Crew, Ubisoft somehow actually managed to delist their game from sale before the announcement of the delistment. Of course, that just furthers the whole thing. Multiplayer games that don't have player hosting or some sort of player ran operation there, and digital games, well, they've always represented a massive risk towards ownership. Right, and even towards the libraries that we have. Look, you could have your Xbox Game Pass, your PlayStation Plus, as soon as that thing stops, all those game experiences you've had, they're kind of gone now. You haven't built your own collection. You've just rented one, which even if renting is financially even a more efficient option for some people, there's almost a cognitive thing about ownership, I own that, I can trust that. Of course, the thing is, you don't own a game. You own a license to the software, which I don't particularly love. And look, generally, Valve, one of the better actors out there. I mean, in at least that they try to be so hands-off that any damage they do tends to be, we've been so hands-off, something's went wrong, rather than, hello, we're going to meddle with all of your things. But even though they do have their kill switch, well, if you breach their end-user license agreement, well, you don't own those games. Games you bought on Steam. They're all gone. You can't play them. So if your Steam account is worth a large amount of money and there's a EULA breach, that's all gone. Now, of course, we can discuss, should you have breached the EULA or not? But of course, false positives, they can happen. And even if it was to be overturned, well, you would be inconvenienced because in the other way, you would have just had the game installed on your PC and you just click the exe and boom, there it is. It's not going to be like that. Steam, of course, is a form of DRM. It's funny, people's definition of that, but Steam is DRM. It is. One of the services Valve provides to developers is literally DRM. What does it stand for? Digital Rights Management. And that's just facts. Now, look, it is good that Steam has their own DRM kill switch, where they can basically press the button and, there you go. Play all your Steam games. No matter what, Steam DRM is turned off. But, I mean, who knows? Maybe that only gets pressed in World War III. But of course, though, this is only accelerating, and this is happening in a few different ways. Number one, Xbox Series S, no disk drive. PS5 digital, no disk drive. PS5 Slim, optional disk drive, right? And I mean, even right with the Slim's optional disk drive, it needs to be paired with the console before it's used. And then obviously the S is basically saying, hey, no discs, that's the future. So if you're worried about ownership of games, technically it ain't just subscriptions, it's also digital. Totally is. And that's a funky thing, and it actually touches on some news that is really just broke in the UK, and perhaps this will also happen in the US because it involves games retail. Because as of this week, Game, which, look, if you're in the US, Game, that would be our equivalent to GameStop, right? Like the main place where when you were younger, go into town, buy some video games. read the manual on the way home, you know, whenever game manuals were a thing that had lore in them, and then you'd play them. Well, of course, these groups all made, like, really I don't want to say most because I don't have their financials, but pre-owned was humongous for them. Because look, when you buy a new game, publishers, you know, got some money from that. When you then trade that game in, the publisher has no idea. When that game is then sold to somebody else for a profit, publisher has no idea. They don't get a cut of any of that, which is why they did the whole thing of, you know, pay £10, $10, whatever, to upgrade your pre-owned edition to be multiplayer compatible, because the games industry actually found that pre-owned was damaging them so much. And I suppose how the tables have turned, because now Game have confirmed that they will be no longer accepting video game trade-ins from next month. And as Ryan Brown says, yeah, that is a massive blow to the physical market. And if you want some numbers behind that, well, this is from BBC. 2022, almost 90% of games sold in the UK were digital. There's actually just less physical sales going on. I don't know what it's like for you guys over in the States, but you see, if you go into a store like Game here, I mean, yeah, you do see plenty of video games, but more and more and more store space is some peripherals and merch. Similar with HMV, you know, like, yes, they do have some vinyl, they do have, you know, CDs, Blu-rays, all of that, but lots of merch. That's clearly the way these guys have got to go, because it's just not how we experience a lot of this media these days. And if you want to reminisce on something, I really did love this that appeared on Twitter. Just, you know, 4 for 20 quid. There you go. Not getting much action? Grab a cheap thrill. We won't be beaten in trade-ins. And all of that, which fundamentally has changed. So between the worry of these subscription services, what we're even seeing with digital, our ideas and ownership are actually changing. Because if you are going to go back to, you know, Mr. Ubisoft subscriptions man and replace the word subscription with ownership, that ship has kind of sailed, which is a pretty depressing fact. So essentially, there you have it. That's what's going on with physical and digital, and why Ubisoft think that actually some people will just pay $14.99 to play a brand new game right now, while some other people will, to play that very same game, pay $50, $60, $70 right now for the privilege of owning, brackets, a license to play, close brackets, that game on their platform. And while these subscription services for some publishers, like say No More Robots, even taking a look at our publisher, Fellow Traveler, like they did have some Game Pass deals in the past, and I'm sure in like most of those cases, like for those devs, it's like, hey, our game just gets to be played by so many more people, which is humongous when it comes to like brand. I mean, as an example, Citizen Sleeper was on Xbox Game Pass. I actually think it's still on Game Pass. It's a fantastic game, but for so many people who maybe would have thought like, like a science fiction, more sort of, you know, like kind of like narrative game, I don't know, I normally wouldn't really, free in Game Pass. Just download it. And it's an indie game, it's not going to be a big download, just go play it now. And maybe that person will then buy Citizen Sleeper 2, as an example. That's one sort of benefit of one of those subscription services. Yet, of course, in a way, you could say it's a benefit only for the people who are able to get there. But ultimately, as much as I can see that boogeyman existing, and I do see the worries that are out there, you still do have to look at the sorts of viral hits that have got nothing to do with Game Pass. Vampire Survivors, massive before Game Pass. Even look at Lethal Company. I mean, I know that's just the most recent example, and I know that the levels of survivorship bias that I'm now engaging are completely absurd given that game, but it is a handy example. But to be honest, the sad fact is, when we're dealing with gaming, it's survivorship bias absolutely no matter where you look. It'll be survivorship bias for all the people who don't get onto the subscription service, or all the people who don't reach critical mass in a world where on Steam you get like, what, 14, 15, 16,000 games releasing a year or some crazy shit like that. Okay, correction. 14,500 games were released on Steam last year in 2023. We were one of them, and it's pretty crazy to think that, like, yeah, we're one of 14,500 on that platform. And the thing is, I know that percentile-wise, we were a very high percentile success. Does that have us in a position where we're all like, you know, Lambos and expensive liquor? No, absolutely not. Day-to-day cash flow stuff is actually goddamn relevant. That is what a real good success looks like. Games are really, really tough, actually. It's a pretty damn hard industry to make it in. Yeah, man, it is interesting. I really hope that we don't just end up being subscription land. I mean, how many great bits of media just die because they're not accessible because of the way we consume media? Here's a really good example. There was a real good show. I really enjoyed its first 2 seasons called Counterpart. J.K. Simmons in a dual role. Really fantastic show. But look, it was pretty awkward to get. And there's been a few other times that's happened, where it's like, this is an amazing television show, and guess what? You just can't watch it legally in the UK. Congratulations, because of the way the licenses and the subscription services are working. And you then just wonder, okay, the people with the gates to the audiences are the people who own the big services. And I suppose the more consolidation and stuff like that happens, well, the more the people who are better at, some would say networking, some would say schmoozing. Will there be a correlation between that and, building your game? That's positive. I think in many cases, yes. But also think about all the people out there who could be making fantastic games who aren't going to be able to, say, afford to fly out to all the conventions and do all of the things in the biz dev to make the deal and blah, 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 blah. It's going to be so many people. So, the more we do move to subscriptions, there's definitely winners, but there's also losers. And it's good that a large studio like Larian has people at it who are kind of raising the alarm bell to that, because it's a pretty real one. Okay, that's it. But at the very least, per Ubisoft man's numbers, yeah, their subscription service is growing massively, but it hasn't outstripped the other stuff yet. Maybe we can put this one off for a few years. Anyway, that's it for now. Thanks for watching. Of course, you can check out this video next, and if you want to support what we're doing, support the show existing, check out bellular.ghost.io, and yes, we're still working on a new URL. Gremlins be gremlins.